It was the year 2050, and virtual reality had taken over the world. The latest craze was a game called The Haunted, which had become an instant sensation. The game was set in a dark, abandoned mansion where the player had to solve puzzles and uncover secrets to escape. The game promised a thrilling experience, unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. The game quickly became the talk of the town, with everyone raving about how realistic it felt. People would spend hours playing, and some even became addicted to it. But then, something strange began to happen. Players started experiencing strange and terrifying events, both in the game and in the real world. Some players reported seeing ghosts and other supernatural entities in the game, while others claimed to have heard eerie whispers and screams in their headphones. But that was just the beginning. As time went on, the game's popularity only grew, but so did the strange occurrences. People began to report feeling as though they were being watched, even when they weren't playing the game. Others claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their rooms. But the scariest thing of all was what happened to the players who spent too much time in the game. They began to experience strange and disturbing visions, as though they were living in a parallel universe where the lines between reality and the game were blurred. One player, named Jack, had been playing the game for weeks on end when he began to experience these visions. He would see strange apparitions that looked like they were from the game, but they would appear in his living room or bedroom. Jack became increasingly frightened, and his family grew concerned. One night, Jack's mother went to check on him and found him curled up in a ball on his bed, muttering to himself. She tried to shake him awake, but he wouldn't budge. When the ambulance arrived, Jack was unresponsive, and he was rushed to the hospital. Doctors couldn't find anything physically wrong with Jack, but they noticed something strange about his brain waves. It was as though he was still in the game, even though he wasn't playing. They had never seen anything like it before. Meanwhile, reports of strange occurrences related to the game continued to pour in. People claimed to have seen ghosts in the streets, and some even reported hearing whispers and screams coming from their smartphones. The game's creators were baffled, but they insisted that the game was safe and that these events were just coincidences. But the public was not convinced. They began to protest outside the game's headquarters, demanding that the game be shut down. The protests grew larger and more violent, with people setting fire to buildings and breaking windows. The government finally stepped in, declaring a state of emergency and banning the game. But it was too late. The game had already spread too far, and people had become too obsessed with it. It had become a part of their lives, and they couldn't let it go. As the days went on, the strange occurrences continued. People reported seeing strange symbols in the sky, and some claimed to have received messages from beyond the grave. It was as though the game had opened a portal to another dimension, and now, there was no going back. One day, a group of players gathered outside the game's headquarters, determined to find out what was really going on. They stormed the building, demanding to see the game's creators. But what they found inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. The creators had been working on a secret project, one that went far beyond what anyone could have imagined. They had created a machine that could transport people's minds into the game, allowing them to live out their wildest dreams in a virtual reality. But in doing so, they had unknowingly opened a door to the other side. The machine had tapped into an otherworldly realm, one filled with ghosts, demons, and other terrifying entities. As players entered the game, They were unknowingly opening themselves up to possession by these entities. And as the game grew more popular, the entities grew stronger, feeding off the players' energy. The group of players who had stormed the building were quickly overpowered by the possessed creators, who had become nothing more than vessels for the entities. They were trapped in the game, unable to escape. But there was one player who had a different plan. She had been playing the game since it first came out, but unlike the others, she had never become addicted to it. She had always sensed that there was something wrong with the game, something sinister lurking beneath the surface. As she watched her fellow players being dragged into the game, she knew that she had to act fast. She had to find a way to shut down the machine and close the portal to the other side. She made her way through the maze-like corridors of the building, dodging possessed creators and ghostly apparitions along the way. She finally arrived at the machine, a massive, pulsing device that hummed with otherworldly energy. She knew that she had only one chance to shut it down, and so she reached out and pulled the plug. The machine sputtered and died, and the portal to the other side began to close. But the entities were not going down without a fight. They lashed out at the player, trying to drag her into the other side with them. But she fought back, summoning all of her willpower to resist their grasp. Finally, the portal closed, and the entities were banished back to the other side. The possessed creators collapsed, their bodies empty husks. The other players, who had been trapped in the game, were freed. Their minds returned to their bodies. The game was over, and the world slowly returned to normal. But the memory of the haunted virtual reality game lingered, a warning to all who dared to delve too deeply into the realm of the unknown. From that day forward, the player who had saved the world from the haunted virtual reality game became known as a hero, a legend, and a cautionary tale all rolled into one. And the game itself became nothing more than a footnote in the history books, a reminder of a time when humanity had almost gone too far. After the incident, the company responsible for creating the haunted virtual reality game was shut down, and the creators were never seen or heard from again. The player who had saved the world from the game tried to warn others about the dangers of virtual reality, but her warnings fell on deaf ears. People continued to use virtual reality technology, but with a newfound caution. As for the player herself, she tried to move on from the experience, but she found that the memory of the haunted virtual reality game continued to haunt her. She suffered from nightmares, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, even when she was alone. One day, as she was walking down the street, she saw a billboard advertising a new virtual reality game. It looked innocuous enough, but she knew better than to trust what she saw on the surface. She knew that there was always the possibility of something dark and dangerous lurking beneath. So she continued on her way, and as she walked, she made a vow to herself. She would never again play a virtual reality game, no matter how harmless it might seem. She had seen firsthand the dangers of delving too deeply into the unknown, and she had no intention of ever putting herself in harm's way again. And with that, she walked into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she had the strength and the courage to overcome them, no matter how frightening they might be.